Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it waits, quietly, patiently, hidden in the cracks of old houses and the corners of memory until the day it rises again, demanding to be faced. Anna Carlyle hadn't planned to return to Ashwood. She had sworn, the day she left for college, that she was done with the town, with its gossiping neighbors, with the suffocating weight of her family's silence. But promises, she would learn, are fragile things. All it takes is one phone call, one funeral, to pull a person back into the places they thought they had escaped forever. Watch until the end to experience a powerful reunion that will touch your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. HT Family Drama for more moving family. The train screeched into the tiny Ashwood station, its wheels grinding against the rails with a shrill metallic whine. Anna pressed her palm against the cool glass of the window and watched as the platform rolled into view. A modest stretch of concrete, flanked by a weathered bench and a vending machine that looked older than she was. The town hadn't changed. Not really. Her reflection in the glass caught her eye. 32 now. Hair pulled into a neat bun, a crease forming between her brows. Older, sharper, but still carrying the shadow of the girl who had once stood on this very platform, suitcase in hand, vowing never to come back. Yet here she was. The air that greeted her as she stepped off the train was sharp and earthy, filled with the scent of pine and rain-soaked leaves. She inhaled deeply, letting it settle in her lungs. For years in the city, the air had been heavy with exhaust and ambition, with deadlines and noise. Here the silence pressed in on her, almost too intimate, like a memory she wasn't ready to recall. She dragged her suitcase down the familiar stretch of Main Street. The same faded storefronts lined the road. The diner with its flickering neon sign, the barber shop with the striped pole spinning lazily in the wind. Mrs. Graham's bakery still sat on the corner, the smell of fresh bread wafting faintly through the chilly air. Even the crooked lamppost by the post office leaned at the same odd angle, as if frozen in time. But while the town had remained stubbornly the same, Anna had not. She was not the timid 15-year-old who had watched her older brother storm out of the house one night, never to return. She was not the girl who had begged her father for answers, only to be met with silence so heavy it became unbearable. She had left that girl behind, or at least she had tried to. At the end of the street, the Carlyle house came into view. It stood tall and weary, its shutters sagging, paint peeling in long, tired strips. The once proud Victorian had been in her family for 3 generations, a landmark of sorts in Ashwood. But now it looked like a relic of another life, a monument to all the words never spoken within its walls. Anna stopped at the gate, her suitcase handle gripped tightly in her hand. Her father's funeral had been quiet, attended mostly by townsfolk she barely recognized. He had lived his last years in solitude, stubbornly refusing to leave the house even as it fell into disrepair. Now it belonged to her. Every creaking floorboard, every dusty corner, every memory she had tried so hard to forget. Pushing the gate open, she climbed the porch steps. The boards groaned under her weight, and for a fleeting moment she imagined her father sitting in the old rocking chair, pipe in hand, watching the world go by with that stern expression he wore like armor. But the chair was empty, and the air smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Inside, the house was colder than she expected. The curtains were drawn, the air heavy with neglect. Dust motes swirled in the thin shaft of light that slipped through a crack in the drapes. Every sound, her footsteps on the wooden floor, the creak of the door closing behind her, echoed too loudly, as though the house itself was startled by her return. Anna set her suitcase down and wandered into the study. The room was just as she remembered. Shelves lined with books her father had read over and over, the old oak desk piled with yellowing papers, the leather armchair worn down by years of use. It was as if he had simply stepped out for a moment and might walk back in any second. She pulled open the top drawer of the desk, half expecting to find nothing more than pens and scraps of paper. Instead, tucked at the very back, hidden beneath a stack of unpaid bills, was a journal. Its cover was cracked, the leather faded to a dull brown. Her breath caught when she touched it. She drew it out slowly, brushing off a layer of dust, and then she saw the writing on the first page, in her father's precise, familiar hand, for Anna, when she returns. Her throat tightened. He had known. Somehow, impossibly, he had known she would come back. Anna sat down heavily in the armchair, the journal balanced on her lap. Her fingers traced the letters, her heart pounding in her chest. She had come to pack boxes, to sign papers, to put an end to a chapter she thought had already closed. She had not come for this. The silence of the house pressed closer, as if urging her to open it, to let the past spill free. But her hands trembled, and for a long time she simply sat there, staring at the words that seemed to look back at her, waiting. The journal sat on Anna's lap like a living thing, its weight disproportionate to its size. She stared at it for a long time, the cracked leather cover rough beneath her fingertips. The last time she had touched anything of her father's, she had been 15, slamming her bedroom door in his face after he refused yet again to speak of Michael. She had sworn never to ask again, never to give him the chance to silence her with that cold stare. And now, here he was, speaking after death. Anna inhaled sharply, snapped the journal open, and let the first page greet her. Anna, if you are reading this, then I am gone. I did not leave you much in life, and I know that what I left you in silence may outweigh the things I gave you in love. This journal is not an inheritance. It is an apology, a confession, and perhaps a map. I cannot undo the past, but I can leave you the words I never had the courage to speak. Her hands trembled as she turned the page. The handwriting was neat, controlled, but beneath each careful stroke, she could sense the weight of hesitation, of words rewritten and rewritten before they were finally committed to paper. The next entry was dated 15 years ago. She blinked. That was the year Michael left. Michael is gone. I told myself it was his choice, that he was old enough to face the world without us. But the truth is, I drove him away. My stubbornness, my anger, my inability to forgive. These were the nails in the coffin of our family. Anna asks where he has gone. She cries at night, thinking I cannot hear her. I hear everything. I simply do not know how to answer. Anna's breath caught. She pressed her fist against her mouth to stifle the sound that rose in her throat. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. All those years she had begged him to tell her where Michael went, and he had looked at her with that stone face, telling her nothing. She had thought he didn't care. She had thought he had erased Michael from his heart. But here, in his own hand, was the truth. He had heard her. He had known her pain, and he had said nothing, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to bridge the gulf he himself had created. She turned another page. I failed Anna today. She asked again if Michael will come home for Christmas. I told her no. She asked why, and I turned away. The look in her eyes, I will never forget it. She will not ask again. She has learned what silence means in this house. Anna let the book fall closed, her chest rising and falling in ragged gasps. Memories collided in her mind, jagged and painful. Christmas after Christmas with an empty chair at the table. Her mother trying to smile through the ache, humming carols as if pretending hard enough could fill the void. And her father, silent, never allowing Michael's name to pass his lips. She had thought it was cruelty. Now she wondered if it had been cowardice. Wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, she opened the journal again. She needed to know more. The entries shifted over the years. Some were mundane notes about the garden, the weather, the books he was reading. But threaded through them were fragments of guilt, reflections on choices made. and words he could never bring himself to say aloud. And then, on a page worn thin by repeated reading and rewriting, she saw it. Her name. Anna, my bright one, my careful one. You left this house at 15, but in truth I lost you long before. You learned early that silence was safer than asking questions that would never be answered. You learned to carry your pain alone because I would not share it. I want you to know that I saw you. I saw the nights you stayed awake waiting for your brother to return. I saw the way you looked at me, begging for an explanation, and I chose silence, thinking it would protect you. I was wrong. It only protected me. Forgive me, if you can. Her vision blurred again. She clutched the journal to her chest, rocking slightly in the chair. The words were raw, searing, more intimate than anything her father had ever spoken to her face. He had lived behind walls, and now, too late, he had lowered them. But it wasn't just about her. A later entry, written in a shakier hand, nearly tore the breath from her lungs. I think of Michael every day. I pretend I don't, but I do. Where is he? Does he eat well? Has he forgiven me? Or has he erased me as I erased him? I would give anything to hear his voice again. But pride, my old enemy, keeps me chained. If Anna ever finds him, if she ever has the courage that I lacked, tell him this. I am sorry. I loved him. I always loved him, even when my anger spoke louder than my heart. The words lit a fire in Anna's chest. Michael. Her brother's face rose in her memory, laughing, teasing, tossing a ball back and forth in the yard. Then the shouting match with their father, the slamming of the front door, the silence that followed. She had been left behind in the ruins, bewildered and broken, while her father refused to speak and her mother quietly withered from grief. And all this time, her father had carried Michael inside him, just as she had. Anna flipped to the very last page, her heart hammering. The handwriting was uneven, as if written by a man near the end of his strength. Anna, if you read this, then the weight is yours to carry now. But perhaps you are stronger than I was. Perhaps you can do what I could not. Michael is not lost, not truly. The world is smaller than we imagine, and he is closer than you think. I leave you this, an address. It may no longer be his, but it is the last I knew. Go, if you can bear it. Tell him I am sorry. Tell him I loved him. Tell him I never stopped being his father, even when I pretended otherwise. Below the words was a scrawled address. Anna stared at it until the lines blurred. Her hands shook as she closed the journal and set it on the desk. Michael. Alive. Maybe. Her father had left her more than a house to empty and a funeral to endure. He had left her a task, a plea, a chance to mend what had been broken for nearly 2 decades. But could she? Could she face the brother who had walked away? Could she bear the anger that might still burn in his heart? Could she forgive the father whose silence had shaped her life? The journal lay between her hands, heavy as a verdict. She didn't have the answers yet. All she knew was that for the first time in years, she felt something other than numbness. She felt a door creak open, a path unfurling before her. Her father had written, Michael is not lost. And now, Anna had to decide whether she was willing to find him. The address burned in Anna's mind long after she closed the journal. She sat in the study until the sun slid beneath the horizon, painting the room in shadows. The silence of the old house pressed against her, heavy and suffocating, as if the walls themselves carried the weight of her father's secrets. Her father's words echoed in her head. Michael is not lost, not truly. Not lost. For years she had convinced herself he was gone forever. It was easier than imagining him alive somewhere, choosing not to return, choosing not to see her. But now, with an address inked in her father's hand, the question gnawed at her. What if he had been waiting all along? Anna pushed back from the desk and wandered into the kitchen. The room was as she remembered, faded yellow wallpaper, the old kettle still rusting on the stove. She filled a glass of water, but her hands shook so badly she spilled it onto the counter. Could she really do this? It wasn't just about finding Michael. It was about facing everything she had buried, her own anger, her resentment, the years of silence that had calcified into something almost permanent. She feared what she might see in his eyes. Hatred? Indifference? Or worse, nothing at all. Her father's journal lay on the table, closed now, but its presence was undeniable. She pulled it toward her, ran her fingers over the cracked leather cover. This book was his last attempt at redemption, his final plea for forgiveness. He had chosen her as the messenger, the bridge between past and present. "Damn you," she whispered into the quiet. "Damn you for leaving this to me." The house did not answer. It only creaked softly, as if in agreement. That night, Anna couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling where faint outlines of glow-in-the-dark stars still clung, relics of a girl who had once dreamed of escape. Memories rose unbidden. Michael sneaking into her room at night to tell her stories, whispering that one day they'd run away together and leave the house behind. He had left. She had stayed. She turned on her side, burying her face in the pillow, but the address would not leave her mind. By morning, her decision was made. She rose early, dressed simply, and packed a small bag. The journal went in last, nestled between clothes, as if it were the most fragile thing she owned. Standing in the hallway, she hesitated, staring at the family photograph still hanging on the wall. Her parents younger, Michael grinning, her own face alight with laughter. A frozen moment from a life that had unraveled. "Wish me luck," she murmured to the photograph, though she wasn't sure to whom she spoke, her father, her brother, or the child she had once been. The drive was longer than she remembered, winding roads lined with pines that loomed like sentinels. Rain spattered against the windshield, a steady rhythm that matched the beating of her heart. Each mile closer to the address brought a new wave of doubt. What if the house was empty? What if he had moved on, built a life that no longer had space for her? What if knocking on his door reopened wounds neither of them could survive? She tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Fear was no longer reason enough to turn back. When the town finally appeared on the horizon, Anna's breath caught. Smaller than Ashwood, quieter even, with streets lined by modest houses and a scattering of shops. Ordinary. It was the kind of place Michael might choose, she thought, a place where no one knew his history. The address led her to a narrow street at the edge of town. Her heart hammered as she slowed, scanning the numbers. Finally, she saw it, a small white house with a sagging porch and a garden overgrown with weeds. It looked lived in, though not well kept, as though its owner had more important battles than lawn care. Anna parked at the curb and sat for a long moment staring at the front door. The journal lay on the passenger seat, silent but insistent. This was it. Her hands trembled as she reached for the door handle. She stepped out into the damp air, the smell of rain clinging to her clothes. Every step up the walkway felt heavier, as though the ground itself resisted her approach. At the porch, she paused. Memories swirled. Her brother's laughter, his shouting match with their father, the echo of the door slamming behind him. That had been the last sound of him in Ashwood. And now, she stood on the threshold of hearing his voice again. She lifted her hand and knocked. Once, twice. Her breath hitched as footsteps sounded inside. The door began to open. Anna's world narrowed to a single point of light, the possibility that her brother stood on the other side. The door swung open with the slow creak of tired hinges. For a moment, Anna's breath stopped in her throat. The man standing before her was older than the brother she remembered. His hair, once dark and unruly, was now streaked with gray. Lines carved his face, especially around his eyes, as though life had pressed hard upon him. But those eyes, still the same piercing blue, still unmistakably Michael's. He blinked, and the silence stretched. His gaze flickered from her face to the suitcase at her feet, then back to her face again, as if searching for proof. "Anna!" His voice cracked on her name, hoarse, almost disbelieving. Her own reply stumbled out, thick with tears. "Hi, Michael." Neither of them moved at first. They simply stared at each other, as though trying to bridge nearly 20 years with nothing but their eyes. The weight of unspoken words pressed down on both of them, and for a moment Anna feared he might shut the door. But then his hand rose, tentative, as if reaching toward a memory. "God, it's really you." The dam inside her broke. Tears blurred her vision as she stepped forward. He didn't hesitate. His arms opened and she collapsed against him. The embrace was rough, desperate, clumsy with years of absence, but it was real. Michael held her tightly, one hand cradling the back of her head like he had when she was a child, afraid of thunderstorms. His shoulders shook, and she realized he was crying too. "I thought I'd never see you again," Anna whispered into his shirt, her voice muffled. "I thought you hated me," Michael choked. They clung to each other on the porch, the rain dripping from the eaves above them, until the years of silence felt a little less insurmountable. Finally, Michael pulled back, his hands still gripping her arms as if afraid she might vanish. "Come inside, please." The interior of the house was modest, worn but lived in. Faded curtains framed the windows, a sagging couch sat against one wall, and the faint smell of coffee lingered in the air. Anna set her bag down cautiously, her eyes scanning the small space that had been her brother's world all this time. Michael gestured for her to sit. He moved into the kitchen and returned with 2 chipped mugs of tea, setting one before her. For a while they didn't speak. They just sat across from each other, steam curling from the mugs, studying faces both familiar and unfamiliar. Anna broke the silence first. "I found Dad's journal." Michael froze, his mug halfway to his lips. "His journal?" She nodded, reaching into her bag. She pulled out the worn leather book and set it gently on the table between them. "He left it for me, for us, really." Michael stared at it as though it were a weapon. His jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening around the mug. And what did he have to say? His voice was sharp, but beneath it she heard the tremor of old wounds. Anna's throat constricted. She wanted to choose her words carefully, but they spilled out raw instead. He was sorry for everything, for driving you away, for shutting me out. He wrote about how he thought of you every day. Michael's laugh was bitter, brittle. "He thought of me? That's rich. He sure had a funny way of showing it." Anna's chest ached. "I know. Believe me, I know. I hated him for it too, for years. But Michael, he really did regret it. He wrote it down because he couldn't say it. Maybe that's not enough, but it's something." Michael looked away, his jaw working. His eyes glistened, but he blinked the tears back. For a long time, the only sound was the ticking of a clock on the wall. Finally, he whispered, "I waited, for him to call, to say anything, but the phone never rang, not once." Anna reached across the table, resting her hand on his. "He was a coward, he admitted that, but he loved you, he never stopped." Michael's hand trembled beneath hers. Slowly, as though afraid of his own need, he turned his palm upward and clasped her hand in return. They sat like that, brother and sister reunited at last, holding on to each other as though trying to make up for every year lost. Tirbar, after the tears had quieted and the tea had gone cold, Anna opened the journal again. She turned to one of the final entries and read aloud. "If Anna ever finds him, if she has the courage I lacked, tell him this. I'm sorry. I loved him. I always loved him, even when my anger spoke louder than my heart." Michael's breath hitched. He closed his eyes, pressing the heels of his hands against them. For a moment, he looked like the boy she had once known, The boy who had laughed too loudly, who had promised to protect her, who had walked away with fire in his eyes and pain in his heart. When he finally looked at her, his face was wet with tears. "Do you believe him, Anna?" She swallowed hard. "Yes, I do." Michael let out a long, shuddering breath. "Then maybe I can try to believe it too." The night grew late, but neither wanted to let go of the fragile thread they had found. They spoke in halting sentences, piecing together the years they had missed. Michael told her about drifting from job to job, about nights he'd thought of calling but couldn't bear the sound of their father's silence. Anna told him about college, about the city, about how lonely it felt to carry the weight of being the only child left. There was anger, yes. Bitterness still lingered like a shadow in the room, but there was also something else, something tentative, fragile, but undeniably present. Hope. When Anna finally rose to leave, Michael walked her to the door. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled of damp earth and pine. He hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe you could come back tomorrow. Stay a while." Anna smiled through her tears. "I'd like that." They stood in the doorway, brother and sister, no longer divided by silence, but not yet healed either. The path ahead was uncertain, full of jagged edges and old scars. But for the first time in years, it was a path they could walk together. As Anna stepped into the night, she felt her father's journal heavy in her bag, but her heart a little lighter in her chest. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds of Anna's childhood bedroom in Ashwood, casting pale stripes across the walls. She hadn't planned to sleep there, but exhaustion had claimed her after the emotional storm of the day before. The journal rested on the nightstand. Its presence was both comforting and suffocating, a reminder of the past, but also the key to the fragile bridge she and Michael had begun to build. By midday, she found herself back on the narrow street of his town. The small white house looked less intimidating now, though her heart still hammered as she climbed the porch steps. She knocked gently. The door opened quicker this time. Michael looked tired, as though he too had spent the night wrestling with ghosts. But when he saw her, his lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "You came back," he said. "I said I would." For a moment, neither moved. Then he stepped aside, and she entered, feeling the air between them charged, but softer than the night before. They sat in his kitchen again, this time with fresh coffee steaming in their mugs. Silence stretched, but it wasn't the suffocating kind anymore. It felt more like space, room for words to grow if they chose to. Anna opened the journal, flipping to the entry she had marked with a folded corner. "There's something I think you should hear." Michael leaned back, arms crossed, but his eyes were fixed on her. She read aloud. "I remember the night Michael left. I shouted words I did not mean, words I cannot take back. I told him he was a disappointment, that he was not the son I wanted. It was a lie, a cruel, cowardly lie. The truth was that I saw myself in him, the fire, the stubbornness, and I could not bear it. I punished him for being what I could never admit I was. If I could live that night again, I would hold him instead of turning away." When Anna looked up, Michael's jaw was tight, his eyes glistening. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "He never told me that, not once." Anna reached across the table, her hand hovering until he let her rest it on his. "He couldn't. He didn't know how, but he wanted you to know it, Michael. That has to mean something." Michael let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "It means he waited until he was dead to say it." The words hung heavy. Anna didn't argue. He was right. But after a pause, she said quietly, "Maybe that's the only way he could. Maybe writing it down was the bravest thing he had left." Michael's gaze dropped to the journal. His shoulders sagged. "I hated him for so long. I told myself I'd never forgive him, but hearing this..." He trailed off, his voice breaking. "I don't know what to feel." "Feel everything," Anna whispered. "Anger, sadness, relief, whatever comes. It doesn't have to make sense right away." For hours, they read together. Page after page, Anna's voice carried their father's words back into the world. Confessions of regret, fragments of love hidden beneath layers of pride. Sometimes Michael would interrupt, his voice sharp with remembered pain. Sometimes he would fall silent, tears streaking down his face as though each line chipped away at walls he had built too high for too long. They argued, too. "You don't know what it was like, Anna," Michael said at one point, slamming his palm against the table. "He wanted me to be him, tough, cold. I couldn't do it. And when I refused, he threw me out." "I do know," Anna shot back, her voice trembling. "He didn't throw you out, Michael. He let you go because he couldn't bend, and I was left behind to live in the silence you left. Don't you dare say I don't know what it was like." Her words sliced the air, and for a moment she feared she had broken the fragile truce. But then Michael lowered his gaze, his anger softening into shame. "You're right," he murmured. "I left you with him. I didn't think about what that meant for you. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore." Anna's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I know, and I don't blame you for leaving. I blamed you for not looking back." Michael reached across the table then, his hand covering hers. "I'm sorry for leaving you, for making you face him alone." Her tears spilled freely now, but she didn't pull away. "I needed to hear that." Being fell, the weight between them shifted. The journal no longer felt like a weapon, but a tool, a bridge. Michael closed it gently, his fingers lingering on the worn cover. "So what now? We've read his words. We've cried, yelled, said some of the things we should have said years ago. What happens next?" Anna looked at him, at the lines of age and grief etched into his face, at the boy she had lost and the man he had become. She thought of their father's plea, of her mother's quiet hope that love could survive even the worst silences. "What happens next," Anna said softly, "is that we try. We don't have to fix everything tonight. Maybe we never will, but we can try." Michael's lips curved into the faintest smile. "You always were the stubborn one." Anna laughed through her tears. "You taught me well." That night, as she drove back to Ashwood, Anna felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and lightness. The road stretched dark and quiet ahead, the headlights carving tunnels of light through the trees. The journal rested on the seat beside her, but for the first time she didn't feel like it belonged to her alone. It was theirs, hers and Michael's, a testament to pain endured, but also to the possibility of healing. For years, the silence had been unbearable. But now, the silence between them felt different. Not empty, not hostile, just quiet, waiting to be filled. And for the first time since childhood, Anna believed it could be. 2 days later, Anna stood on the porch of the Carlisle house in Ashwood, staring at the weathered boards as though they were alive. She had called Michael that morning, her voice steady but her hands shaking as she asked him to come. He had agreed without hesitation. Now, as she waited, the house loomed behind her, a skeleton of memories, each window like an unblinking eye. She had lived here for 15 years, but it had never felt like home. It had been a battleground, a mausoleum, a place where words died before they were spoken. The crunch of tires on gravel pulled her from her thoughts. Michael's car rolled to a stop beside the gate. He stepped out, hands shoved deep in his pockets, eyes cautious but determined. For a moment, Anna wondered if he would hesitate, if the ghosts inside would be too much. But then he met her gaze, and she saw the same resolve mirrored in his. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." Together, they pushed open the door and stepped inside. Air was thick with dust, motes drifting lazily in the sunlight that slanted through the cracked curtains. The silence was the same as ever, but with Michael beside her, it felt less oppressive. They wandered through the rooms, each space triggering fragments of memory. In the kitchen, Michael traced a finger over the worn countertop. "Remember when Mom tried to teach us how to bake bread?" Anna laughed softly. "We ended up with something closer to a brick than a loaf." She pretended it tasted fine. He smiled faintly. Dad didn't even try to hide his grimace. They moved into the living room, where the old armchair still sat by the window. Michael stared at it, his expression unreadable. That's where he always sat, reading, pretending we weren't falling apart. Anna touched his arm. He wasn't pretending, Michael. He was just trapped, in himself, in his own failures. Michael let out a long breath. Maybe. Upstairs, the hallway smelled faintly of cedar and age. They paused outside Anna's old room. She opened the door slowly, revealing the remnants of a girlhood frozen in time. Posters peeling from the walls, books stacked on a shelf, the faint outlines of glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Michael stepped inside, his eyes roaming the space. "You used to sneak into my room with your flashlight when you were scared of the dark." Anna smiled wistfully. "You told me stories about running away, about how we'd escape together." His face darkened. "I broke that promise." "No," Anna said firmly. "You kept part of it. You escaped. I just wasn't ready then." They stood in silence for a moment, the past pressing gently around them. Then Michael turned toward their parents' room. "Do you want to?" Anna hesitated, then nodded. The door creaked as it opened. The room smelled faintly of lavender, though the scent was faint, fading. The bed was neatly made, as though waiting for someone who would never return. On the nightstand sat a framed photograph of their parents on their wedding day, young, hopeful, untouched by the years that would weigh them down. Michael picked up the frame, studying it. They looked happy. "They were," Anna said quietly, "at least once." He set the photo back down with care. Then his eyes shifted to the desk in the corner, the same desk where Anna had found the journal. He walked over, running his hand along the wood. "This is where he wrote it?" "Yes." Michael's expression was unreadable. He opened a drawer, glanced inside, then shut it again. Finally, he turned to Anna. "I don't know if I can forgive him. Not yet. Maybe not ever." "That's okay," Anna said gently. "Forgiveness isn't the point. The point is, we're here, together. We're not carrying it alone anymore." Michael's gaze softened. For the first time, she saw not just the anger in his eyes, but something else. Relief. They ended the day in the backyard, where the old oak tree still stood tall and proud. Its branches stretched wide, the tire swing long gone, but the rope mark still visible on the limb. Anna sat on the porch steps while Michael leaned against the tree trunk, both of them quiet, listening to the rustle of leaves in the breeze. "I used to think this house would swallow me whole," Anna admitted, "like I'd never escape the silence inside it." Michael tilted his head back, eyes closed. "I used to think leaving meant freedom, but it didn't. Not really. I carried the silence with me everywhere." Anna looked at him, her voice steady. "Maybe we can put it down now, together." Michael opened his eyes, and for the first time in years, his smile reached them. "Yeah, maybe we can." When the sun dipped low, casting the yard in golden light, Anna pulled the journal from her bag. She set it between them on the porch step. "What should we do with it?" Michael asked. Anna traced the worn cover with her fingertips. "Keep it, not as a burden, as a reminder of what silence cost us and of what we found again." Michael nodded. "Then we'll keep it, together." They sat in silence, but this time it was different. warm, unthreatening, the kind of silence that comes after truth is spoken and wounds are acknowledged. It was the silence of possibility. As twilight deepened, Anna felt something inside her shift. The house was still the same. The past had not changed. Their father's failures still lingered in the air, but she no longer felt crushed beneath them. For the first time in her life, the Carlisle house felt less like a tomb and more like a place where healing could begin. Anna turned to Michael, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "So," she said softly, "what happens next?" Michael looked out at the darkening horizon. "We live, Anna. We finally live." And for the first time since they were children, she believed him.